So, are you wondering, is the new Superman movie here in July of 2025, in the event you're watching this in the distant future, any good? Well, let's talk about that today, shall we? This is the Geek Cabal channel. If you've not been here before, my name is Bobbie, and today we're going to be talking about the new Superman movie, written and directed by James Gunn, of Guardians of the Galaxy fame, in case you don't know. Also, I don't know if he writes and directs, but he at least produces the Peacemaker TV series on HBO Max. It's a spin-off out of the DC stuff. So, this being a really new movie, I'm definitely going to separate the spoiler section. It'll come later, and I'll be very clear when that's about to start. Overall impressions, I thought the movie was decent. I don't really have any major complaints, but I did just watch it the one time here recently, and there might be some things that later on kind of percolate down, and I realize probably shouldn't be there, might have a problem with them. And there are one or two that I already know of that I'll mention in the spoiler section. But overall, I thought it was good. Probably 6.5, 7, somewhere in there. It's not spectacular. The new guy is no Christopher Reeve, but then again, who is? I did like Henry Cavill, and I did actually like Man of Steel. I thought Batman vs. Superman was terrible, but Man of Steel I thought was good. It was going in a different direction, so I give it some leeway there. And in the terms of intellectual honesty, I have to do the same thing here with the one or two things I've got to gripe with. But overall, I thought it was good. Not great, but good. It's probably worth seeing on the big screen because of the effects and everything. But I went to a matinee show. I think at a matinee show you're not going to feel underwhelmed. If you can watch it a little cheaper, that's the way I'd go. But it is worth watching. In my opinion, it's worth watching in theaters. So, who do we have in this one? We have David Corenswet, I hope that's how you pronounce his name, as Superman and or Clark Kent. The only stuff he was in that I noticed was that it is kind of up my alley is Twisters, and I'm trying to recall who he played, and Pearl, which I haven't watched, but it's a sequel to the movie X, which I have watched, and I'll probably watch at some point. And I thought he did a decent job as Superman. Again, trying to compare him to Christopher Reeve, there is a scene in the original Superman movie that showed that perfectly encapsulates Reeve's acting ability and his physicality, and how he's able to effortlessly portray Clark and Superman in different ways through several little nuances that the outside observer would never consider the two the same person. And it's whenever he's going to meet Lois for a date. I think he shows up as Superman first, if I remember right, and kind of wows her, and then shows up as Clark. And while she's in the bathroom, he's sitting there trying to decide if he should tell her that he's Superman. And he's sitting there as Clark Kent, and he takes off the glasses, straightens up, squares his shoulders, and he's Superman. That's all it took, was just the different mannerisms, the different character. And I don't know if it's a case that they just weren't shooting for that here in this movie, because they mentioned the hypnotic effect of the glasses. And yeah, so he just might not have had the opportunity to have a scene like that. So it's hard to say, but we didn't see anything like that. So now we have Nicholas Hoult, who plays Lex Luthor. I consider him a vast improvement over Jesse Eisenberg. I don't have anything personal against Jesse Eisenberg as a person or an actor, but he was horribly miscast as Lex Luthor. He is about as intimidating as, I don't know, a snail, a slug, nothing. I know Lex typically is not portrayed as super physically intimidating, even though he's like a martial arts master and some other things. But, he typically has that air of menace. The main comparison at this point, though, is Gene Hackman. He was far better, but Gene Hackman was portraying a pre-crisis Lex Luthor who was not the multi-billionaire industrialist. He was the mad scientist Lex Luthor. So he's not a great comparison, because Gene Hackman was playing a version of Lex Luthor that's completely outdated compared to the last 40 years of comic book history. the current iteration of Lex Luthor is the billionaire industrialist, and I think Nicholas Hoult did a far better job. He was clearly willing to go the distance on a lot of things just to bring down Superman. You know, he had that menace, also the arrogance. Yeah, like I thought he did a good job. In case you know who he plays Beast in the latter X-Men movies that take place in the past. So Days of Future Past, well, First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and Dark Phoenix. I don't remember what they called the fourth one. Also, the title character in the movie Tolkien, where he plays J.R.R. Tolkien. I thought he was really good in that. I believe it's an excellent movie. I don't know how accurate it is to Tolkien's life, but it's an excellent movie. And also plays Renfield in the movie Renfield, and several other credits. You know, but these are just the ones that kind of relate to a lot of the movies we talked about on here. Then we have Rachel Brosnahan, I think is how you pronounce the name, as Lois. Now, I've not watched House of Cards, but she's apparently in that, along with the marvelous Miss Maisel, where she plays the title character, I believe. And I haven't seen that either. But I thought she did a pretty good job as Lois. Definitely looked like Lois. Kind of felt like she was channeling Margot Kidder in a few parts. You know, I thought she did a pretty good job. Then we have Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, the Green Lantern Guy Gardner. For those of you that don't know about Guy Gardner, he is a wise ass and definitely very distinct personality among the various Green Lanterns that have been from Earth. Notable that Batman punched him out in a Justice League meeting one time. Nathan Fillion, best known probably for Castle, because that ran for several seasons, but also Firefly as the main captain of the ship. Hate to say this, you're going to tear up my nerd cred card here. Didn't actually watch Firefly. Watch Serenity, though. I should go back and watch Firefly at some point, I suppose, so I can be disappointed whenever I find out there's no more of it. Then we have, I don't know if it's Edie or Eddie, Gathegi. I apologize, I'm probably horribly butchering that name. He plays Mr. Terrific, who is, they don't mention it in the movie, but he's the third smartest man in the DC universe, behind Lex and Bruce Wayne, being 1 and 2 respectively. The main thing I know him from his credits is he played Darwin in X-Men First Class. Got very shafted in that role. His power is literally that he adapts to anything and can't be killed, and well, he got killed. Like, I don't even know how to explain that. And then we have Isabella Merced as Hawkgirl. She was in Alien Romulus. I don't recognize for sure who she was in Alien Romulus, plus I've only watched it a couple times. I don't have the characters' names down. But she also played Dora in Dora and the Lost City of Gold, as in Dora the Explorer Dora. And a number of other credits. And then, of note, some other characters, just briefly. I didn't realize that 2 of the characters in the movie, until I looked at the credits before I started filming this, are supposed to be updated versions of Otis and Miss Tessmacher, who notably were in the first and second Superman movies. And I don't know if they are of a comic book origin or not, but they are in the movie. Otis is far more competent. Miss Tessmacher seems to have gained most of the incompetence, kind of. It's hard to explain without going into spoilers. But we also have Metamorpho, the Engineer, and Ultraman. And for those of you who know comic book characters, you might be wondering about one of those, and I'll explain it in the spoiler section. So, what's it about? It's not an origin story, because James Gunn is on record as saying that's one of the I think 3 comic book things that we don't ever need to see in movies ever again, is the crash landing of Clark in Kansas, the back alley murder of the Waynes, and I think the other one is Spider-Man getting the spider bite. But now this is Superman's already here, and he has engaged in some affairs of foreign issues that have people questioning some things about him. A lot of it's like kind of background engineered by Lex, and yeah. So fights a few threats throughout the movie. Obviously, you got Lex, you got Lois, you got the staff at the Daily Planet. They're kind of important towards the end. They don't get a ton of screen time. Aside from Lois, it's mainly Jimmy Olsen. Perry White gets a few lines here and there. And yeah, they're mostly background to make Lois and Clark's job kind of make sense. I guess it's the best way to explain them. But this all comes at a time, like I said, where Superman has done a few things that people have begun to question some things about him, and it's him going through that, him trying to reassure people that he is here for good intentions, things like that. And I think overall it does have a hopeful tone to it. I know that James Gunn and someone else in the cast mentioned something about trying to understand that Superman is an immigrant, and that's important to the story. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand Superman. And I think he even said, "Don't go watch the movie." Well, for whatever it's worth, to assure anyone that thinks that the movie's being over politicized or anything within the movie, it's not. Okay, I don't even think the fact Superman is super technically, and this isn't to wade into that whole discussion, but I believe refugee is the better term. He didn't willfully come to the planet or the country. His homeworld has literally been destroyed. There's no place to go back to. His people are completely wiped out. At least, early on in this version, that's what he believes anyway. It seems like the comics keep finding Kryptonians every time he trips over something. But I think more accurately he'd be called a refugee. Not that that's a huge critical difference to that discussion. But don't think that the movie, it goes into some rant about any current political things or stuff like that. Okay, you could conceivably call part of it an allusion to another current foreign affair, which I'll get into in the spoiler section, but even that would be kind of a stretch. So if you're concerned about that, it's not here. Okay, despite comments of people in the movie, which they're free to make. It's it's First Amendment's free country. I personally think it's a mistake to make those comments before the movie comes out, because part of the audience will be turned off because they're going to think you're overly politicizing the movie. And I'm just trying to tell you folks that didn't happen. That's not here. I have seen news commentary to the effect that it is politicized. And again, this is one of those moments like people who say things like, "Oh, when did the X-Men comics become political?" And it's kind of like, I think you might have missed something along the way if you're asking that question now. Now we can talk about degrees. There are certain things in the X-Men comics that have become far more prevalent in the last decade or two. But, going back to the 70s, there's clearly a message in there. It's just that the people who are writing it were really good writers and knew, like the old Star Trek show, knew how to put the message in a context where if you wanted to, you could ignore it. Or you could realize that it's an allegory. And that it's not necessarily talking about you. It's not pointed. And so it allows people to think about it without it being an accusation at them. And I think that's a far better approach, because then people can think about it and hopefully come to the right conclusion, and maybe eventually draw the connection to other things to be like, such and such was right on this topic, and now I'm presented with a real world scenario that's very similar. Maybe I should consider that. If that's your goal, calling people idiots and such doesn't change anyone's mind. It causes them to hunker down and to reinforce their position, because now they know they're right because they disagree with you, and you just said they're wrong, therefore they're right. It's just a thing with human condition, the human condition. So my point is, there's none of that in the movie. There's nothing like that in the movie at all. However, if there were, it wouldn't be particularly out of place. Superman has gotten very political in the comics. There's a comic series where it's literally called Superman versus the Klan, if I remember right. And very importantly, the comic is credited with convincing a lot of Klans people that they were wrong in their beliefs and to quit the Klan. So, proper messaging does work. So, and I think that one's probably, I've not read it myself, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty on the nose too. So, but that's a different case. That's an organization that's literally a hate group. Yeah, you probably should be opposed to them, all things being equal. So yeah, but my point is, there's no over politicization of anything in this movie. It is just a superhero movie that has the oh so dastardly message of maybe you should be good to other people. Maybe, like maybe don't be like Lex Luthor. If you see yourself in Lex Luthor, you might want to rethink your life, because this is not the Lex Luthor that you see in like Lex Luthor Man of Steel, who might objectively have a point, who's pro-humanity. And like there's pieces of that, but there's enough other things that like that's probably just a facade. He just hates Superman because he stole the limelight. And that's the just evil, egomaniacal Lex Luthor, which, that works. It's how he's in the comics most of the time. So, not all villains have to be relatable. But if it were the Lex Luthor Man of Steel Lex Luthor, then maybe, the whole, like, if you're seeing yourself in him, there he's not completely evil. So, maybe. But he also lives in a world with people with superpowers, so kind of hard to relate to that sometimes. Most of the time. So anyway, that little aside. Overall, like I said, I think it's a good movie. My main non-spoiler complaint that I can mention here real quick is actually a musical complaint. The music in the movie very heavily borrows from the John Williams score from the original Superman movie from the 70s, but never commits to it. Like, it keeps building, like at some point it's just going to go for it, the big soaring part, but it's like the background part here and there, and like in every song in the movie, but never gets to the big triumphant, just over the top. Clearly, this is Superman's big moment. Like they roll at the end of Superman, whenever he's flying up into space, and there's where the music just starts blasting. It never hits that point, and so it just teases you through the whole damn movie about it, and it's not in the credits either. So I think that was an audio mistake in my opinion. It should have, in the final battle at the very least, been blasting once Superman has the upper hand. And I think that was a mistake. I don't like things like that just beat around the bush and never commit. Especially when one of the earliest things in the credits is noting that the score was written by John Williams. Like, it clearly knows it's there. So, yeah. That's one of my big complaints from a movie production standpoint. Other than that, the movie looked fantastic. There's some interesting camera work, like during action scenes, like things would kind of rotate around and move to different angles and stuff, and that was kind of interesting to see. This movie did not pioneer that. It's somewhat based on technology, I believe, that they initially pioneered in the Matrix, the first one. This would be similar conceptually. But there was something else I watched recently that kind of did some stuff like that. It might have been Jurassic World. It might have been the Jurassic World movie. But anyway, here you see it quite a bit too, and it's an interesting technique. And yeah, I think other than that, I will note, this isn't a spoiler because I'm not going to tell you what's in them, but there are 2 credit scenes. There's one in the middle of the credits, and there's one at the end of the credits. I'll explain in the spoiler section that you don't really have to stick around for them. The one in the middle is totally pointless. The one at the end, there's a laugh you'll get out of it, but that's about it. And they're not setting up anything else. So that's about all I've got to say before we get to the spoilers. So if you're jumping off here, like I said in closing, it's probably 6.5, 7. It's definitely watchable. I don't think it's trash like I've seen others. I haven't watched any of the reviews, but I can tell by the titles that's where they're going. So yeah, and don't listen to what anyone says on the news. Those people don't know anything about anything. Seriously, I watch the news just to have a rough idea of what's going on, but I think some of those people are just complete vapid morons. So anyway, going to be going to the spoiler section now, so if you're jumping off here, let me know in the comments what you think. Are you going to plan to watch the movie yourself? Have you seen it? Anything at all like that? Like, share, subscribe. Sharing and commenting are the things that help us grow the channel. We always appreciate it. And subscribing, definitely appreciate that. It's the name of the game here on YouTube. Thank you folks who helped us get over the 500 mark not too long ago, and hopefully you stick with us. If there's any other kind of content you want to see, let me know down in the comments section. We'll see what we can do. But now we are going into the spoiler zone. And I'm going to try to keep this brief because it is a new movie and I don't want this to be a 40-minute long video. So, spoilers. Okay, where to begin? So, Superman's recent actions that I mentioned are he intervened in an impending war between two countries. I can't remember what they're called. They're fake countries. And one of them seems to basically be like knockoff Russia that somehow is bordered by like knockoff random Middle Eastern country where people apparently don't have any real weapons. So maybe like upside down in a mirror through a sniper scope at 1,000 yards, this could be some kind of allegory for the Russia-Ukraine situation, but I don't think it's meant to be. Hard to say. The leader of not Russia, I believe, was in. I should have looked him up. I think he was in the year two. I think he's in the movie 2012. I think he's the Russian oligarch in that movie. Pretty sure it's him. So he is. Superman went and stopped the invasion, and everyone's like, "What are you doing there, Superman? Aren't you kind of a representative of the U.S. government? And didn't you just stop one of our nominal allies from invading a country that we consider an enemy? And who told you you could do that?" So this is one of the only parts of the movie that I feel kind of let down by, because I know it's not going to. I know they're not really going to pursue this line of thought, but this is the line of questioning that has led to several very excellent comic book storylines, and essentially it boils down to that whole like, who said you could do that, and does anyone need to give superheroes permission to do that, and if they say no, how are they actually going to enforce it? And this is I did some videos not too long ago kind of talking about how sometimes fiction gets a little too close to reality, and this is one of those moments because it begins, you start having to question the whole superhero thing, because the federal government couldn't stop Superman even if they wanted to. So what does stop him from intervening in human affairs? You know, I mean, he does raise the excellent point that people will be killed in this military action, but who gave him the right to stop it? And that's goes down the whole rabbit hole of, well, the superheroes are ultimately just vigilantes, which is illegal. And that's how you get stories like the Squadron Supreme storyline, the Watchmen storyline, and the Dark Knight to an extent. Like, it's led to very excellent storylines, but I know we're never actually going to get this in the movies. We're never going to go there, because it goes to a really dark place really quickly. And so it's unsatisfying that the specter of it is raised, but it's never going to be fulfilled. Because, and again, it kind of leads to, it leads to the other problem of very quickly the superhero world no longer is almost our world. Because, like, objectively, if I 100% trusted Superman, if I were in their world and 100% trusted Superman, yes, I would want him to stop international conflicts like that. Because we would have an individual that, in theory, we trust, and there's the problem, that has the power to actually stop these conflicts, to stop people from needlessly being killed, and to maybe try to get like actual lasting peace. You know, try to get people to the negotiating table and figure out like, why are you trying to fight? What's the goal here? And of course, the problem is that goes to the really dark place of, well, what if they're irreconcilable? You know, like, what if you can't convince the invading leader that they should stop invading? Like, does then your superpowered character decide to take matters into their own hands? You know, and that's the rabbit hole of that. So, as I was saying, it's just kind of a waste that we're never really going to go into any of that, I'm sure. But yeah, so the majority of the plot is built around Lex trying to destroy Superman. You find out that basically all the various machinations, he even got these two countries to go to war in the hopes it would draw him in so that he would have a public reason to get the government to give him the go-ahead to try to attack and capture and or kill Superman. So, yeah, it's all just one giant plot from Lex. And to this end, he's also done some other things. He convinced a woman to let him pump her full of nanites So she's now the engineer. She can basically morph her body into various weapons, whatever she can envision. And he also has Ultraman, who, for those of you who are comic fans, you know that Ultraman is the Superman from Earth 2 or 3. I think it's 2. Could be wrong. I know it's 2 or 3, and I can never remember which one. And he is, on that Earth, he is their version of Superman. Their Earth is ruled by the crime syndicate, who they're all versions of the other heroes. There's an evil version of the Flash, evil version of the Green Lantern, evil Batman known as Owlman, and so on and so on. So that's where the name comes from. And on that Earth, I think he was an astronaut who gains powers from eating kryptonite or something like that. I don't know for certain, so I'm probably getting that majorly wrong. However, here he's just a clone of Superman. Not as smart, but stronger. So Lex can control him, and he can probably beat Superman. So, anyway, so he breaks into the Fortress of Solitude at one point. And Superman, up to that point we've seen, has a message from his parents, from Krypton, his parents. And by the way, Jor-El is played by Bradley Cooper. So it's in their language, and it's translated, and basically, saying, "Oh, we love you, Kal-El, and we sent you to a planet where you can do the most good, this, that, and the other." And then the message is all garbled after that. Well, an engineer is able to hack into the computer by merging with it with their nanites, and is able to get the rest of the message. And the rest of the message is basically telling Kal-El to rule the Earth as he sees fit, to get a harem, to begin populating the planet with half Kryptonians to spread his Kryptonian DNA everywhere. And Lex broadcasts this to the world, and Mr. Terrific vouches for the people that are vouching for this authenticity. So, yeah, that's a little bit of a deviation from the usual storyline. So, and that's the part that I'm kind of iffy on, because it seemed like there was no reason to do that, other than for this particular plot to happen. So, that's counter to every other version of Jor-El that we see. And so, yeah, I'm like, there needs to be more of a payoff than just this movie for that. And that's why this movie is 6.5 to 7, because this particular plot point is not good, in my opinion. So yeah, so then we have our other characters get involved, Guy Gardner, Hawk Girl, and Mr. Terrific. They show up whenever Superman's fighting a giant monster that LexCorp created, and they are the currently known as the Justice Gang, and that's purely Guy Gardner's naming for them, which leads to various banter among the team. And they have the Hall of Justice that we see that ultimately the Justice League occupies. And there's a joke towards the end about that, because the people, like the government, knows that Superman's vulnerable to kryptonite. They don't think there's any of it left on Earth, but Lex claims he has a way around that, and that's because he's captured Metamorpho, who can turn into anything, including kryptonite. So he uses him against Superman, but then Superman breaks him out and his kid that's being held there. So towards the end, he helps them stop this war, because Lex gives the president of not Russia the go-ahead to invade, while he's having Ultraman fight Superman. And so the Justice Gang goes and deals with that. And Metamorpho's like, once they defeat him, Metamorpho's like, "Hey, can I join you guys?" And like, Metamorpho looks kind of hideous. Guy Gardner's just like, "Oh, no, that's all right." And, it's kind of like, because of the way the guy looks. But he's like, "I know this Justice Gang. That sounds like a cool name." And the guy's like, "You know what? You're in." So, you get that kind of humor from it. I think Nathan Fillion did a pretty good job as Guy Gardner. And the other guy, Edie Gathegi, and again I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but he did a good job as Mr. Terrific. Mr. Terrific. And of the three, he gets a lot of the screen time, because he goes off with Lois to try to rescue Superman. And it's, I think he's a decent character, so it's nice to see some other people. If you've seen the trailers, you know that Superman's dog Krypto is also in the movie. It has powers, can fly and super strong and all that stuff. The fortress is there, the Superman robots are there, So there's some kind of deep cuts into the lore there. And there's some well-known voices among the robots. Alan Tudyk plays one of them. We get a little bit of screen time with Ma and Pa Kent. Now, that is unfortunately where I had to go use the restroom. However, the little bits I saw, I think James Gunn doesn't understand the difference between Kansas and, like, Florida. Like, they sound like good old folks from the South and not people from Kansas. And, like, it doesn't change their demeanor or anything like that, but, like, literally, like, how they talk. And that's not accurate. Like, people from Kansas do not sound like people from Mississippi or Alabama or Georgia or Florida. Like, they don't. Just like I don't sound like a person from California or New York because I'm not from California or New York. So, regional dialects are kind of a thing. But I know there's a kind of a stirring moment with Paul Kent, and, telling Superman, that who you are is a sum of what you've done, what you do, not who your parents are and things like that. And the part I caught was pretty good. Yeah, and because this is after he's found out that his biological parents basically sent him there to conquer the Earth. And so at the beginning of the movie, he's having to heal there in the fortress. They've got a thing that focuses yellow sunlight because it's the source of power that's causing him to heal. And he's listening to the playback. And so at the end of the movie, when he's listening to the playback of his parents, now it's Ma and Pa Kent on Earth. It's replaced Jor-El and Lara. Yeah. So, it's an acknowledgement that his parents on Earth were far more important to him than the parents he's never met. Because they did not raise him. Ma and Pa Kent raised him. They made him the man he is. Superman, the hero, the person willing to go out there and, help others, no thought to his own safety. Not that many things can actually hurt him, but you know what I mean. It still takes up an awful lot of his time. So, yeah. So overall, like I said, I think, I think it's a hopeful movie. It's a good movie. There are a few parts that, James Gunn kind of couldn't get out of his own way for things that are happening, and they're mildly funny. And it's not overly funny like the Guardians movies, but it's the same kind of humor. And I'm not, I have to say this a million times when I talk about these kinds of movies. It's not that I want them completely devoid of humor. It's just that a lot of them go just that one step too far, and it's like, does this really work? There's a point where Lois and Clark are trying to have a very serious conversation about their relationship, their future, and everything else, while the Justice Gang is fighting an interdimensional imp outside. You've seen it in the trailers probably. It looks like a big kind of squid thing. And she's at one point even is like, hey, do you need to go help them? And he's like, no, they got this. And it's like, they probably do, but you're literally the most powerful being on Earth. You could have them have it done in less time and less things get destroyed. So it's one of those yeah, it's kind of funny at the moment, whereas, but also as the premier superhero, should you not be concerned with that? Is this really the time for a joke? So it's little moments like that sometimes don't work. And that's what happens whenever you try to just, make things not quite a comedy, but include just that touch too much humor, Most of the rest of the things in the movie, the levity's good for most of the rest of the movie. But it's just, there's those couple moments where you're just no, we don't really need the joke here. Let's be the serious moment it needs to be. And I thought James Gunn, overall does a good job. I like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. There's one or two moments here and there, but for the most part, the humor works there because the whole narrative's been crafted around that. Because they took a team of Z-list characters that 10 people on the planet know anything about, and they could shape them to be whatever they wanted to be. Superman is literally the most recognized comic book character, most recognized fictional character on Earth, in the real world here. Everyone has expectations. You can't just willy-nilly change things about him. People notice. And so that's where things like this, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So I should note that there is a cameo by his brother playing Maxwell Lord. It's pretty funny. But also, John Cena as Peacemaker is in the movie. Which leads me to wonder, are we still part of the last version of the DC universe? What exactly is going on here? Because John Cena's Peacemaker is from Suicide Squad Part 2, which is the Henry Cavill DC universe Superman. He's even kind of in the season finale of season 1. Jason Momoa's Aquaman is in it for sure. who else I've seen it. I thought some of them were kind of shadowed, but I don't remember who else actually there. So, like, are these the same continuity or not? I don't know. Someone proposed the idea that we're supposed to believe that the Flash movie, the Flashpoint, screwed up everything, and that's how we're going to go explain it going forward. I don't know, and I would like to know, because I'd like to know what's canon and what's not. So, that's another thing that brings it down a little bit. The John Cena cameo itself, though, funny. I like him as Peacemaker. I'm looking forward to season 2. And again, none of this is trashing James Gunn. Like, I like him as a director. Like I said, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are great. I thought the third one was one of the strong points of that particular phase of the MCU, and I really think that they should have just, the moment the Jonathan Majors situation popped up, they should have dropped Kang like a hot potato and picked up the High Evolutionary, because he was a real villain. Like, yeah. So, anyway, I can't think of any other major things to mention. There's probably something that, like, 20 minutes ago I said I'm going to mention that in the spoilers, and I've totally forgotten now, and I apologize if that happened. That's what happens when you don't have a script. I'm not going to start making scripts, so it's all off the cuff. And I had to pause for like 8 minutes while something happened off screen that I couldn't have be on here, so the sound, nothing like illicit or anything. But yeah, so that's about all I've got on this one. Like I said, 6.5, 7. I liked it. I wouldn't have felt bad paying full price, but I don't think it's as good as the Reeve movies. Honestly, I thought Man of Steel was as good or better, but I'm one of the few people that actually liked Man of Steel. Like I said, I gave that one a chance based on this new interpretation, so I'll give this one the leeway also, as far as like the whole thing with Jor-El and all that. So we'll just have to see how that pans out. But overall, 6.5, 7. Worth a watch, worth a watch in theaters, maybe matinee price, but definitely worthwhile. And yeah, now we just have to see if the Fantastic Four is any good or not. But we've got about 2 weeks to wait on that one. So let me know what you folks think down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Sharing and commenting helps us grow the channel. We always appreciate it. Subscriptions, obviously, that's the name of the game here on YouTube. And we thank everyone that helped us get over 500 recently. And hopefully you stick with us for wherever all this goes. But yeah, that's all I've got to say on this one. So just remember, it stands for truth, justice, and the American way.